Hey, it's Donny. This lesson is going to show you how the CAGED system can unlock the fretboard for you. I'm going to go over how everything connects between these shapes. I'm going to show you how this works for the major chord shapes and it works for the minor chord shapes. And then most importantly, I'm going to show you how each chord shape sits inside of one of the forms of the pentatonic scale. So there's 5 forms of the pentatonic scale, and I'm going to throw some tabs on the screen to help you understand this. But each chord sits inside one of those forms of the pentatonic scale. And I also want to show you how the triads are built off of these CAGED shapes. We're not going to go through all of the different triads, but I just want to give you an idea of how the triads that are built up the neck are just built off of these chord shapes and how you can start using them. And grab your guitar, sit back, and let's dive in. So the CAGED system is when you take the open shapes and you move them up the neck. So you can find a C chord in every position on the guitar. So if we're going to start with C, you have a C major, and that's open. Then you have a C major here, that's the A shape. Then you have a C major here, and that's the G major shape. You can, put your pinky down here if you can stretch. Then you have the E major shape on the 8th fret. And then you have the D major shape, which typically is just played with 3 strings, and that's a triad that you can use as well. So this is really helpful because we'll go over how these shapes connect and how it's going to open up the fretboard for you. So we just went through major, and now we can look at how this works for minor as well. There's not typically a open C minor chord, but if you're going to play it, it'd look like that. It's not typically used, but that would be C minor, and then you would have the A minor shape, and then similar to that for G minor, also not typical, but you can do that. And then there's the E minor shape, and then the D minor shape. As well. So it works for minor. We're going to stick to major in this lesson, but I just want you to know that this works for minor as well. Within these CAGED shapes, you can see that everything connects. Like you have a C shape here, while the root of your C note is also the root. It's also a C, and it's the root of your A shape for C, right? And then for when you're doing this G, like if you were open and you were doing a G chord, you would have the D and G strings would be ringing open. So this is your A shape, right? And then part of your A shape is part of your G shape, right there. And then the root of that G is part of this E major shape. And then technically, if you're going to do that D, this note right here is a C. If you're going to do the D shape, and that's the root of your D shape, right? So all of these chords connect, all of these shapes connect. And then that brings me to my next point, and then that is how this really started making sense to me, is that underneath every one of these shapes, like a C, A, underneath every one of those is a scale shape. So there's a major scale, or what I wanted to talk about particularly is the pentatonic shapes. So you can really learn how all the pentatonic shapes connect. So there's 5 forms of a pentatonic scale, and with those 5 forms, there's a chord, whether it's an A or a G, underneath every one of them. And we can just run through those quick. I'll put some tabs on the screen for it. But if you have a C right here, it's a little more difficult. But just to start out, I call the form 1 pentatonic the one that everybody uses the most, which in this case would be your A minor and your C major pentatonics are the same. So my form 1 pentatonic is the 5/8, 5/7, 5/7, 5/7, 5/8, 5/8. So that's what I'm considering form 1. So if we were going to start down here with this C chord, I would call this form 4. And what form 4 pentatonic is to me is this shape. So then you realize that your form 4 pentatonic shape has this regular C chord in it. And you can also do that down here. So down here would be a little tougher, but this would be a C as well. So what that teaches you is that you have it kind of teaches you within those pentatonic shapes, you have arpeggios that you can play. So then if we were here, I'm going to move down to that A-shaped pentatonic. That A-shaped pentatonic that A-shaped chord, for C major is sitting over a form 5 pentatonic, which form 5 to me is so right there you have form 5, and then since there's 5 forms, you're back to form 1. So within that, you have obviously this A-shaped C chord is part of this, right? So the first part of it is that you have this C triad within here on the D, G, and B string. And then if you get up to your G chord, you can add in and then obviously so if you're playing out of that shape, you have multiple chord tones to work with this triad of the A-shaped, and then you have the G-shape, which gives you these 2 notes, it gives you these notes. On the B and high E string, you have multiple options, and then, on your A and low E string, you have options on the 7th and 8th fret respectively. So that's form 1, and then form 2. Form 2 has the E shape.
So now that you're here, you have this, and you'll see this. So you have. And then in addition to that, so this is a triad, this is a triad, right? So in that shape, you have your C in the E major shape within that form 2. And then form 3 would be the last form, and that's where you have your lovely D major triad, which typically if you're, or your D major chord, if you're playing that as a triad, you're just going to play the top 3 strings. You're going to play the G, B, and E string and do this little D shape here. This would be an actual D chord. But what you have here on this third shape, you're starting on the high E. So you have your D sitting in there. And then what's nice is that form 3 goes into the form 4 very well. That's one of my favorite besides the form 1 to use for soloing. So we had it here. The bottom part of the scale on the low E, A, and D string has this little box. That's the same box on a form 1. Sorry, this is a little bonus tip. And that slides right into form 4. Sorry, getting a little carried away there. So what's cool about that is then now we know we had our D shape here. Well, our D shape is really just a portion of that C shape, right? So you can see that this connects by, you had a D shape here. If you take this root note out on your D string, and you don't play it like that anymore. Now, since you know your C shape was over here, the top of that is just part of your C shape. So that D connects right to a C. Anywhere you have a D, you have a C. So if you had a D right here, you have another D right here, and that's a D shape. That's a C shape D. And then from there you have another D. So this is all movable based on what key you're in, obviously. So that's what's really nice about this pentatonic. Another thing that's nice about it, now that you know it connects to all the pentatonic shapes, and the pentatonic shapes all connect off of the CAGED shapes, is that there's triads within all of this stuff. So anytime, if you're playing all these forms of the pentatonic, you're already hitting all these notes of the triads. If you're playing these chords, you're already hitting the triads. You're just hitting the full form of the chord. So like if you had we showed this form, right? The E major form C. Well, you have a triad on the top 3 strings. You have a triad on the D, G, and B string. You technically have a triad on the A, D, and G string. excuse me, if you're playing that G major shape, you technically have a triad on the low E, A, and D. You have a triad on the D, G, and B. You could add to that. With the high E, B, and G string, you have triads within this A shape. Obviously, we talked about this one that's in the G shape as well. You also have one here on the high E, B, and G string. Obviously, you have your D-shaped triad. As part of that C chord, you have a triad, right? This is a... all these triads connect, which is so cool once you start figuring it out. Right, this is out of your E shape. This is your 1, so your 1, 2, 3. Cool stuff. So, I mean, is CAGED helpful? Absolutely it is, right? My one problem that I have with CAGED, which I don't think it's not a huge problem, it's just I always found it hard to solo with it. And it's not that it's hard to solo with it, it's just like we just went through the whole C major key or C major CAGED system, right? And with that, you have notes of all the C chords, but if you're playing a chord progression that's got a 1, 4, 5 in it, right? Then you have an F in your chord progression, you have a G. One thing that the CAGED system doesn't exactly show you is now where's your F and where's your G if you're trying to solo with chord tones. But that's more advanced stuff. I mean, I would absolutely, if I didn't know the CAGED system, go learn it. I learned it. I learned how it related to all the pentatonic shapes, and then and it helps you. And I mean, you could just put a C chord on loop and go mess around with the pentatonic shapes, right? Or do what I was doing and, play a C and then play licks along with it. You can absolutely do that too. That's an A minor. So yeah, I mean, it's really cool. And the triads are all within it. It's definitely something you need to learn. It's just that, if you have one of those chord progression that's C to F to G or something, it doesn't show you where that F and G is. The F and G. That's where you learn this shape for F and G. You learn, okay, you have a C major triad here. Where is my F in relation to that? Where is my G? And you got to connect all that too, and that all connects too. As long as then you start working on intervals. Like now I know my C is here. So where's my F? Oh, it's right there. And if F is there, I know G's down a whole step. So I hope you found that helpful. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.